I never imagined that planting a small garden in my own backyard would turn into the biggest nightmare of my life. I had lived in the neighborhood for almost 8 years without a single complaint. My neighbors were friendly, my property was well maintained, and I always paid every HOA fee on time. Then a new HOA president took over, and everything changed. His name was Richard, and from the very first day, he acted like he owned the entire neighborhood. People whispered about him at community meetings, but nobody dared challenge him because he seemed to enjoy making life difficult for residents. One Saturday morning, I walked outside and found a bright red violation notice attached to my front door. According to the letter, my backyard vegetable garden violated HOA regulations and had to be removed immediately. I was shocked. The garden wasn't visible from the street, wasn't bothering anyone, and had been there for over 3 years. I called the HOA office expecting it to be a mistake, but Richard personally answered and told me that if I didn't remove the garden within 7 days, I would be fined thousands of dollars. The way he said it almost sounded like he was enjoying the threat. I carefully reviewed the HOA rules and discovered something interesting. There was absolutely no rule prohibiting backyard vegetable gardens. I sent Richard a polite email with screenshots of the regulations, assuming the issue would be resolved quickly. Instead, 3 days later, another notice arrived. This time the fine was $5,000. I couldn't believe what I was reading. When I requested an explanation, Richard refused to provide one. He simply claimed that the HOA board had approved the decision. Something felt very wrong. The next HOA meeting was packed. Apparently, I wasn't the only target. One family had been fined because their basketball hoop was visible from the sidewalk. Another resident received a warning for parking in his own driveway. The entire room was frustrated, but Richard sat at the front smiling as if none of it mattered. When I questioned him publicly about the garden rule, he immediately cut off my microphone and moved to the next agenda item. The room went silent. At that moment, I realized this wasn't about regulations. It was about control. Over the following weeks, the fines kept increasing. 5,000 became 10,000. 10,000 became 15,000. Eventually, I received a certified letter demanding nearly $25,000. My hands were shaking as I read it. Paying that amount would have destroyed my savings. Friends advised me to remove the garden and move on, but something inside me refused to surrender. If Richard could do this to me, he could do it to anyone. That's when an unexpected ally appeared. A retired accountant named Susan, who had lived in the neighborhood for nearly 20 years, knocked on my door one evening. She told me she had been investigating HOA finances after noticing strange discrepancies in annual reports. According to Susan, several large payments had been approved without proper documentation. The amounts weren't enormous individually, but together they added up to tens of thousands of dollars. She believed someone on the board was using HOA funds for personal expenses. The more we investigated, the more suspicious things became. Landscaping invoices listed projects that never existed. Maintenance charges appeared for equipment nobody had ever seen. Then we discovered something shocking. One company receiving regular HOA payments shared the same mailing address as a business owned by Richard's brother. Suddenly everything made sense. The fines, the intimidation, the refusal to answer questions, it all seemed designed to distract residents from asking where the money was going. Susan and I gathered every document we could find and presented the evidence to several homeowners. Within days, word spread across the neighborhood. People who had been afraid to speak up suddenly found their voices. Residents began comparing violation notices and financial records. The deeper everyone looked, the worse it became. Questions that Richard had ignored for months were now being asked by dozens of homeowners at once. The next HOA meeting was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. Every seat was occupied. People lined the walls and filled the hallway outside. Richard walked into the room expecting another routine meeting, but he immediately realized something was different. One homeowner stood up and asked about the unexplained payments. Another demanded copies of financial records. Then Susan presented the evidence linking HOA funds to the company connected to Richard's family. The room exploded with outrage. For the first time, Richard looked nervous. He tried dismissing the accusations, but the evidence was overwhelming. Homeowners demanded an independent audit. Several board members who had supported Richard suddenly distanced themselves from him. Within 2 weeks, the audit confirmed major financial irregularities. Authorities became involved, and Richard resigned before the investigation was completed. The best part came shortly afterward. Every fine issued against me was declared invalid. Not only did I keep my garden, but the HOA was forced to reimburse residents for thousands of dollars in improper penalties. Neighbors who had once been afraid now openly talked about how close the community had come to being controlled by one person's greed. As for Richard, the man who tried to charge me $25,000 for growing tomatoes in my backyard, he disappeared from the neighborhood almost overnight. Today, my garden is bigger than ever. Every time I walk past those rows of vegetables, I'm reminded of an important lesson. Bullies often appear powerful when everyone stays silent. But the moment people start asking questions and standing together, that power can disappear faster than anyone expects. If you enjoyed this HOA story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more unbelievable HOA confessions.